Hello, everybody, and welcome to the annual Burning of Norwalk Scavenger Hunt. I typically like to give this sooner, but due to circumstances, I was not able to. However, this is a roten tradition, and I felt we still need to do it regardless of the situation. So here's my disclaimer to everybody. I am giving you the scavenger hunt. You do not need to go out and do this. However, if you and your parents feel you'd like to go and visit these monuments and take a picture with you or your parents or both at any of these locations, the only one that is currently inaccessible is the painting of Roger Ludlow's Purchase, which is inside City Hall. We are not allowed in City Hall. So unfortunately, that one particular place we cannot get to. However, all of these monuments are pretty much along East Avenue. So if you go to any of them and take a picture at any of these markers, send me the pictures, and that will be extra credit. If you decide to do anything other in the extra credit category, so if you want to make your own Google slide with your answers, or if you want to put together some kind of booklet and send me the pictures of the booklet, or if you want to mail me a booklet, we can talk about that later. But either way, if you want to do something that's extra creative that I don't have here, be my guest. But I'm just putting that disclaimer out there. No, you do not have to go take the pictures due to social distancing. However, if you do want to with your parents, then feel free to and send me the pictures for extra credit. So let's get started. What I have provided you are two different things. One, this is the document you will actually do all of your work in. So I've outlined everything for you. You just simply need to read the plaques and answer the questions. If you so feel that you want to look past these and do a little more research, be my guest. I'm always happy to see extra work being done to learn local history. That's the purpose of this, is to learn more about Norwalk's history. So what I provided for you is also, in addition to this screencast, is the Google slide that outlines every single thing. This Google slide goes monument by monument, all in order. So everything is in order. I have added a couple of extra things. I will be adding one picture later. I'm waiting on it, which is the picture of the Grumman's Hill that was later removed to put the Norwalk in. That is currently not in the slideshow while I'm doing this screencast, but I will add that later. So again, all of your questions go in order here. So when I say stop the screencast, you will stop the screencast so that you can go and answer your questions in this document. So let's get started. Here we go. So here we have the two images, our current seal of Norwalk, which is the Norwalk, the Sound of Connecticut, and our old original seal that pretty much is the stamp of Norwalk. And look, magically, one of the monuments we're going to talk about is embedded in here. So I do apologize for the wind. It was rather blustery this morning when I filmed these. Well, good morning, everybody. Well, today we are going to embark on our journey of the burning of Norwalk. It's a little windy today, but it is morning. It's about 6:30 in the morning. Now, Norwalk residents had no idea on that beautiful day in July 1779 that General Tryon would be coming here with over 2,000 British redcoats and Hessian soldiers to invade our fair town. Now, if you look behind me, imagine over 20 ships masting off of the horizon. That man races in the back. It gives you a glimpse. Imagine the giant mast of a ship coming to our fair port. And where they would land is where I'm currently standing, at what is now known today as Fitch's Point. And they would begin their journey here, where General Tryon would take about half of his forces and begin the burning of Norwalk all the way down East Avenue from this position. you look behind me, closer towards the train bridge in the back, General Garth would take the other half, and he would land at the IMAX parking lot, and he would begin his journey down West Avenue, burning the other half of Norwalk. And the Norwalk residents would ensue in what would be known as the burning of Norwalk. However, was it a burning or a battle? That's yet to be determined. Many people are leaning more towards a battle now because of the amount of carnage that was ensuing because of it. So today you are going to take a look at the burning of Norwalk. Use my videos and pictures to see if you can identify the course of history in our fair city. So here's a picture of Fitch's Point placard. It indicates the date, which was July 10th, 1779. So our first stop is the Roger Ludlow Monument, which is located right at the end of Gregory Boulevard going towards Beach Road. All right, so one of your destinations in this scavenger hunt is right behind me. This marker represents the area or represents the person who is responsible for purchasing Norwalk. His name was Roger Ludlow. Now, Roger Ludlow did purchase the land in 1640 for a few items, which you will have to identify based on a few items that I provided for you. However, Norwalk would not be officially settled for another 10 years. And the area around me, which today we call East Norwalk, was actually the founding area. So many people in this area had roots that tie all the way back to the original foundation of Norwalk. But this marker right here indicates where the original settlement was. And again, it's not too far from Fitch Point, which technically is right down that street, which is today known as 5th Street. So if you were to follow 5th Street all the way down to the end, that's where Fitch's Point is. So when you look at this marker and Roger Ludlow, we can thank him today for founding our great city. So at this time, you're going to pause the screencast so that you can analyze the Roger Ludlow Monument. And here is the plaque. So pause the screencast so that you can answer the questions about Roger Ludlow. All right, welcome back. So when Roger Ludlow purchased Norwalk from Chief Mackamo, he was granted the land between the two rivers. When you're looking at the Norwalk River and the Saugatuck River, this was the original settlement. This is an original settlement map of Norwalk. This map was actually dated around 1847, so it's a little bit newer than 1640, but a lot of the founding families you could clearly see where they settled in East Norwalk. So I just wanted to show you this map so you get an idea of where our founding families settled. Your next marker is over by Mill Hill on the corner of Wall Street and East Avenue. So we give Roger Ludlow all the credit for the founding of Norwalk. Well, when you look at this marker, not just him. There were others that attempted to identify Norwalk, buy Norwalk. There's some recent documents that Nathaniel Ely, he was part of it, hence we have Ely Avenue. When you look at some of the other founding families, Richard Olmsted, it's on the marker here. These are all people that we should give credit to for the founding of Norwalk. But the very first person to set foot on Norwalk, actually I take that back, he didn't set foot, he mapped it. The very first European to map Norwalk was Adrian Block back in 1614. And he called it a beautiful archipelago. And so when you look at this marker, It's thanks to Adrian Block that Europeans were able to identify this area and settle it finally with the purchase by Roger Ludlow. So now what you're going to do is take a look at your second marker, which is right on Mill Hill. Oops, sorry. Technical glitch. So you're going to read this sign, so pause the screencast so that you can answer the questions related to this marker. Excellent. Your next marker is actually at Calf Pasture Beach. So remember, General Tryon came here with over 2,000 troops. So try to get a better perspective of all of those ships inside of our harbor. Sorry, 2,000 soldiers, not 2,000 ships. So I wanted to give you a better angle of Long Island Sound. Trying to imagine all of those ships coming to Norwalk Harbor to invade us on that fateful day in July of 1779. Right here behind me is a special marker indicating that here at Calf Pasture Beach. So I want you to use the picture I have of this marker to answer the following questions. So you can pause the screencast here or this video, and you can answer the questions about what you think the Norwalk residents went through when they saw all those ships on the horizon coming towards them for the fateful day when our fair city would be burned to the ground. So you can do what I said and pause the video, and then you can answer the questions. Now, just to quickly recap, you should be done with site number 1. You should be done with site number 2. And we are already done with site number 3. So make sure you have answered these questions. Now we're moving on to site number 4, which is Grumman's Hill. And there's the marker for the beach. And now let's take a look at Grumman's Hill. All right, I'm at our next stop, which is the former site of Grumman's Hill, which is now today a Norwalk Inn. Standing behind me used to be a hill. Oh, probably a little bit taller than the actual Norwalk Inn itself. By this point, General Tryon, by the time he got to this area, Norwalk was fully engulfed in flames, and by this point, the battle was stiff resistance against the English invaders. So the Norwalk colonists had been joined with militia from surrounding areas, people from Ridgefield, New Canaan, Westport, all the surrounding towns had sent militia because they had gotten word that Tryon was on his way here. He had already been burning cities down from New Haven, Westport. He was on his way down, Fairfield, so he was on his way to us. So people knew he was coming. But by the time the battle really ensued in this one particular area, which again is the Norwalk Inn, which is right behind me, General Tryon has been, the story goes that the house that's right here, right next to Norwalk Inn, which is known as the Grumman St. John House. So as you can see, the house is right behind me. Part of the original structure can date back to before the Revolutionary War, which is what makes this house so historic. But rumor has it that General Tryon reached into the burning house and grabbed a rocking chair, and he placed it on top of Grumman's Hill, and he watched the city burn. So when you look at this area, remember, by this point, behind me, you have the intersection of East Avenue, Wall Street, and Newtown Avenue. This whole area over here by the Norwalk Green. Tryon and his forces had managed to make it all the way to this point, and they converged in this one area, so that your next marker is really where the heavy fighting would begin even more. And that would be ultimately where the battle would end, which is the Battle of the Rocks. So I'm going to sit in this rocking chair, which is so nicely placed. Thank you to the people of the Norwalk Inn. I'm going to reflect on the battle and what General Tryon might have thought about as he sat in a rocking chair on top of Grumman's Hill. So take a moment now and answer the questions that relate to the Grumman Hill Monument, which is your next marker. So you can pause this screencast to answer those questions. Excellent. So now we are at the final destination, which is the Battle of the Rocks marker. All right, well, here I am, the Battle of the Rocks. Ta-da! And when you look at the Battle of the Rocks, this is where the Norwalk residents were able to hold off the British from advancing any further. As you can see behind me, that rock ledge, that's all that remains. As you go up what is now today West Rocks Road, there are remnants of some of these rocks that are still around, but unfortunately, due to a lot of overdevelopment, many of these historic areas have been lost. But going back to history, not modern times. The Battle of the Rocks, this is where Norwalk residents held their ground, and the British realized that with the outgoing tide, and they were starting to get too many casualties, they said, you know what, we did our damage, enough was enough. Because remember, General Tryon, he was about desolation warfare. Leave nothing behind that they can use. Well, all in all, I think about 10 buildings remained out of the entire city. Some of them still remain today over in Silvermine because it was too far out of the way. There's a couple on Strawberry Hill because, again, they were too far out of the way. Even the churches that were on the green, they were all burned to the ground. Everything. There was nothing left. That's why it's called desolation warfare. And General Tryon, we can thank for that. But thanks to the Norwalk residents, we were able to maintain our fair city. But here we go. This is the Battle of the Rocks. So take a moment, stop the video here, and answer those questions. So do as I said. Pause the video and answer the questions on the historic marker on the Battle of the Rocks. So from here on out, anything you do in addition to those other markers that we just talked about, this is the extra credit portion. These extra monuments are extra credit. So if you just simply want a 100 and be happy with the 100, you can end this screencast right now and don't have to go any further. However, if you want those grade boosters, which, I mean, we've got nothing better to do when we're home, you might as well just do it. But this is the grade boosters. These extra sites are all extra credit. So let's take a look. So General Garth had gone up West Avenue, whereas General Tryon went up East Avenue. Now General Garth met a lot of resistance over in the area, which is today Flax Hill, Hillside Avenue, over there in that area. So let's take a look at an actual cannonball, ladies and gentlemen. That was from the Battle of, or Burning of Norwalk. So here I am at the cannonball. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is an actual cannonball from the Revolutionary War. That's right. This was actually from the burning of Norwalk. I am right up the street from Ben Franklin, or as we like to call it, Crystal Theater. This is where General Garth and his troops met stiff resistance from the Norwalk militia. When you look at this area, they actually were rumored to have buried some of the British soldiers that were killed in this battle. And where present day Ben Franklin is, it was actually the Nash residence. And when Captain Nash was putting an addition on his house, they actually found 3 bodies that were British soldiers. So this area is pretty famous. As you can see, this marker right here, well, this is where the battle took place. So we'll take a moment and answer the questions regarding this cannonball. So pause the screencast and answer the questions on the cannonball. So you can pause here to answer those questions. Excellent. So let's go back and do a little more investigating of our founding of Norwalk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, destination next. Here behind me, thanks to the rising sun, it's hard to see, is you have the East Norwalk marker. Now, East Norwalk was originally founded 1649. That's when the first people finally set foot in Norwalk. But it wouldn't be till 1651 that we would officially sign our charter, making us an official colony. Thanks to Roger Ludlow, we were able to do this with the buying of the land from Chief Macklemore back in 1640. Remember, it is the land between 2 rivers. So Norwalk was between the 5 Mile River, the Norwalk River and the Saugatuck River. 5 Mile River was a kind of a gray area, but we still settled it anyways, which is now today Rowayton. But when you look at this area, again, 1649 is when those group of people that you quickly took a look at in the East Norwalk Cemetery came here, but it wouldn't be for another 2 years before we would officially become a colony. And then it wouldn't even be till 1914 that we would become an official city. But that's a different story. So you can pause the screencast here to take a look at the East Norwalk marker. Now, this is an image of the Purchase of Norwalk painting, which is right inside City Hall. So when you go inside City Hall, it's actually right there. You can't miss it. It's a huge painting right next to the elevators. So typically, I would have you go there, you take a picture with Chief Macklemore and Roger Ludlow, but unfortunately, we cannot do that at this time. However, I do have a picture of the painting, courtesy of Mr. Vaccaro. So take a moment and pause the screencast and jot down the answer to that question, which is located down here in the painting. All right, so next, what is a legacy? Well, let's take a look at something called the legacy tree, which is located right on the entrance of the UPS parking lot on Martin Luther King Boulevard. So what is a legacy? Norwalk has its legacy from the Revolutionary War, the flood of 1955, and a multitude of other things. Well, standing behind me is the child of a legacy. We call this tree the legacy tree because this area here behind me, right where that area is right here, once stood the second oldest tree in the entire state of Connecticut. In 1951, the tree actually had a marker dedicated to it. Now imagine if that tree could talk, what it saw, the founding of Norwalk, the Native Americans that lived here, the burning of Norwalk, and all the other redevelopments in this area. But unfortunately, the tree did succumb to lightning strikes and wind storms, And it finally did come down sometime in the 1980s. So today we do have the legacy tree, which is a child of the second oldest tree that remained standing in the state of Connecticut. So take a moment and reflect on the legacy tree. Now, what's interesting is a former Rhoton student actually just put that fence and rocks and rededicated the marker with his Boy Scout troop just last year in November of 2019. I've actually included the article for you to read. It's in your scavenger hunt in the packet, so take a look at that. Also, here are the pictures and the marker. Also, there is a QR code. You could use the QR code and watch a little video about the legacy oak and what it's about. So take a minute, pause the screencast. You could take a look at the QR code, or you could read a little bit more about the legacy tree. Next, we're going to take a look at a famous spy that came out of Norwalk. So one of the things that also makes Norwalk so historic during the Revolutionary War, well, besides being burned and being pirates and supplying the militia and supporting Washington, yeah, it kind of painted us a big target on us, didn't it? Yeah, well, we talked about that. Was in fact a famous spy left Norwalk on his fateful adventure, Mr. Nathan Hale. So here I am at Freeze Park with the marker that talks about Nathan Hale's fateful mission. So back in 1776, Nathan Hale left Norwalk and heading to Huntington, Long Island. Well, unfortunately, he was caught, and he gave his most famous quote, "I only regret I have one life to give to my country." Well, if he hadn't left Norwalk, maybe he would have kept his life, or maybe he would have been caught later. But it's because of Washington's spy ring that he was a part of that he unfortunately did lose his life. But again, Norwalk has all these little tidbits in history, and this is just one of them. So use the pictures of Nathan Hale's marker to help you answer the next 7 questions. So you can pause the screencast here while you look at Nathan Hale's marker. Now, for the next one, I do apologize for the video. I didn't realize that it recorded sideways, but you still get the gist of it. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I am here at the East Norwalk Historical Cemetery. And as you can see right here behind me, this is paying tribute to our founding families. Well, remember, they're the ones that started it all. We wouldn't have Norwalk if it wasn't for them. If you look behind me, the next stop on your destination is, oh, get my bearings here. Right behind me, way in the distance, you can see the marker that shows the founding of East Norwalk. And that marker actually wasn't in that original spot. That marker actually got moved when they were redoing East Avenue. It actually used to be on the corner of Fitch and East. But we'll get a closer look in a little bit. But since we're here in the East Norwalk Cemetery, we can pay tribute to one of Norwalk's most famous residents, Yankee Doodle. It's a little bit of a walk away from the marker that we just looked at. But keep in mind, this cemetery is where most of the founding families all resided. Besides here, you did have some people that are interned over at Riverside Cemetery, Mill Pond Cemetery, or sorry, not Mill Pond. Having a blank here. The one behind Matthew's Mansion. So, Pine Island, thank you. So they're buried over at Pine Island Cemetery, over behind Matthew's Mansion. So we have a lot of historic cemeteries. So remember, when we looked at the French and Indian War back in 1753, that was 100 years after the founding of Norwalk. Here we have Mr. Governor Thomas Fitch. He was the guy that was in charge at the time. And then he was son. Well, remember, Yankee Doodle. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Here we go, Thomas Fitch Jr. So right here in our own historic cemetery, we have not only our founding families, but one of the most iconic people in American history, Yankee Doodle Dandy. Now, he probably didn't think he would ever be called that in his lifetime, but we all have our own legacies, and that is his. So, when you look at all of these different places, Norwalk is very rich in history. One of the other markers inside the East Norwalk Cemetery is Reverend Thomas Hanford. So if you have not paused the screencast to answer the questions on the East Norwalk Cemetery marker, please do so now. That includes this one and Mr. Reverend Thomas Hanford. Now, for the additional extra credit of you going to each of these places and taking a picture, again, practice social distancing, please. I have provided a map. Once you get all the way to the bottom, remember there are some do's and don'ts. I mean, obviously these are markers and burial grounds, so be respectful, please. So please do read through the do's and don'ts. There's a suggested driving order. Remember, currently the beach is not open. You can walk inside the beach, but you cannot park at the beach. So make sure you're aware of where you can and cannot park. Fitch Point is in a private area, but it is accessible by the public. So when you look at each of these areas, here I've provided you with a list and locations for each of these places. So if you have any questions regarding any of these sites, please let me know, and I will be happy to assist. Otherwise, happy hunting, and I look forward to your responses. Good luck, and enjoy this year's Norwalk History Scavenger Hunt.